A cold geometry cuts through our sky tonight, an object with the patience of distances and the certainty of calculus, drawing a line across the solar system as if signing its name in starlight. The arc it traces is not the closed loop of kinship, but the open flourish of departure, a hyperbola etched by gravity's reluctant grip on something that does not belong here. There is a hush that follows the first clean solution to its path, the way a room falls quiet when a door swings open to weather you didn't expect. Numbers have a way of changing a mood. Eccentricity greater than 1. Excess velocity at infinity that refuses to be taxed away by the sun. Inclination that sneers at our ecliptic like a traveler indifferent to local customs. Instruments debate the details, but they all agree on the silhouette. Small, dark, indifferent, a shard of the other place. It radiates the kind of mystery that science respects. A mystery made of measurements, not myths. It arrives not to perform miracles, but to present a ledger, fluxes, colors, timings, a balance sheet written in photons. And yet there is something beyond the balance in the way it turns a corner that isn't ours, like a ship that trusts a map we have never seen. Between observation and inference, we find a narrow ledge where awe can stand without slipping. And tonight, all of us, astronomers, dreamers, and bureaucrats, are on that ledge together, looking outward and forward, then back to a sky that suddenly feels like a hallway. They called it, provisionally, carefully, like a promise you might have to retract, 3I Atlas, a name stitched from the survey system that first flagged its path and the arithmetic that made Interstellar more than a headline. The designation is a story in itself, a lineage that began with 1I Oumuamua and 2I Borisov, a pair of arrivals that taught us how to listen for footsteps in cosmic snow. Oumuamua Wui as the whisper, Borisov, the shout. This object is the echo in a new room. If its interstellar status survives the gauntlet of peer review, it will become a datum on a trend line that may lead to a revolution, the realization that our solar system is not a fenced yard, but a crossroads. The surveys, Atlas, Pan-STARRS, Catalina, Rubin in the near future are our sentries, blinking their pixel eyes through the night, watching for moving specks that don't obey the local grammar. But even among them, this object felt different, as though its velocity had a memory. It carried in its pace and pose the suggestion of history, perhaps born in the unsettled nursery around another sun, rattled by a giant planet's impatience, flung out to sail the interstellar tide for millions of years before dropping briefly into our light. Telescopes turned, software awoke, ephemerides spun into being like thin, bright threads across a loom. In those first days, the story felt crystalline, solid angles, confidence intervals, unheard of coincidences that refused to collapse into noise. It was captivating because it made sense. It was terrifying because it made too much sense. The first nights yielded a diet of clean numbers, astrometry pinned to background stars with mass-scale fidelity, photometry threading through atmospherics as if the air itself wanted to help. The line of best fit walked us past doubt, residuals well-behaved, the hyperbolic excess velocity v, perhaps a few kilometers per second after solar escape, just enough to betray origins beyond our heliopause. Spectra were stingy, true, returning a mostly featureless reflectance curve leaning toward neutral to reddish, the way many carbon dark bodies do. But in that austerity lived a kind of promise that what we lacked in detail we might gain in consistency. A hint of a coma at small phase angles begged the question of volatile release. At these distances, even a faint haze becomes a novel punctuation in a sentence we thought we knew how to read. The photometric light curve suggested rotation, slow, perhaps tumbling, yet nothing so extravagant as to deny the ephemerides their sobriety. Phase function fits proposed a surface more like charcoal's tough matte than snow's eager brightness. That seemed compatible with a traveler marinated in cosmic rays for an epoch, its outer layers baked into inert armor. The signal-to-noise climbed as the geometry improved, filters cycled. A few radio dishes listened for the electrical breath of an ion tail and mostly heard the Earth's own murmur. Still, the narrative held. A small, dark body from elsewhere, moving exactly as Newton says it should, when the sun holds it only by the hem. We wrote it down, every figure and footnote, believing that in the end, adding enough facts would guarantee a kind of peace. If peace was guaranteed, it was short-lived. The residuals began to twitch. Not a Fitz collapse, but a tickle at the edge of certainty, the sort of non-gravitational acceleration that you can bury in the noise only if you want to. Some comets do it routinely, sneezing jets that mimic whispers of thrust. Sunlight itself can press on the eager geometry of an ultra-low density object in the way photons once pushed on the sails of the first radiometers on a classroom desk. But this acceleration was coy, weaker than a comet's tantrum, stronger than a rock's stoicism, directed in a way that didn't always love the radial line. A poet might say it leaned into the path the way a runner leans into a turn. We tested the usual explanations, outgassing from CO or CO2 at temperatures too mild for water, thermal lag between day and night sides, a York by analogy torque muttered across an uneven shape, microporosity that inflated the cross-section to mass ratio just enough for solar photons to matter. None of these were impossible, which is not the same as saying any of them were correct. The acceleration's magnitude and phase had a personality. It is dangerous to attribute personality to data, but sometimes doing so is how we remember that the universe is not obliged to be boring. The object did not erratically course correct. It did not stop. It merely insisted on being itself with a precision that made itself feel like a new category. To be a scientist is to stand on a shoreline and welcome the tide of hypotheses, knowing most will break into foam before they reach your feet. An alien probe is always the most foolish wave, and therefore the easiest to ignore. But this is also the century that will teach us humility about underestimating the variety of manufactured things. The serious speculations lived elsewhere. Perhaps we were witnessing chemistry uncommon in our own cloud of comets, volatile ices that sublimate at temperatures we didn't expect. Perhaps the body was a shard of a tidally shredded planetesimal, its internal scaffolding a foam so sparse that sunlight had leverage a rock could never grant. Perhaps we were on the threshold of understanding radiation pressure as more than a gentle push, but as a partner in a subtle dance with thermal re-radiation on shapes that never evolved inside our solar system's habits. Even the wildest musings tried to keep a hand on the rail of physics. If guidance was present, it was embedded in the material, not in the steering of an intention. If purpose existed, it might be the purpose of geology under foreign suns. And yet we are a species that invents probes when we wonder, and we have wondered for a long time. The line between a natural relic and a deliberate messenger might someday be drawn, but not by opinion. It will be drawn by data as stubborn as gravity. Timing has its own gravity. As the object approached its keenest angles, the sun coughed, coronal mass ejections stacked like thunderheads, solar wind compressions marched across the heliosphere, and Earth's magnetosphere answered with auroras that read like floral signatures across the poles. None of this requires a conspiracy to explain, but coincidence becomes a character when the stakes are high. The sequence of space weather events overlapped observation windows, tinting data with the color of her. In the outer system, a faint alignment, Jupiter not closing a door but standing where a corridor narrows, introduced minuscule perturbations whose measurability felt like a dare. The object's closest approach to the ecliptic plane coexisted with a parade of near-Earth asteroids occupying telescope time. Committee schedules creaked, maintenance windows refused to move. If you were inclined toward poetry, you might say the solar system arranged a test of our focus. If you were inclined toward paranoia, you might say this choreography served a design. The honest truth is more mundane and more beautiful. The universe is busy and our attention is finite. Gravity, indifferent and eloquent, wrote the poem of the object's path in a meter so strict we could perform it from memory. Far upstream of the sun's furnace, the visitor felt the tiniest handshakes from the giant planets. Jupiter's mass lending microradian tilts to the asymptotes of approach and departure. Saturn adding syllables we could count but not feel. In a three-body tapestry, the Sun and Jupiter are an old couple finishing each other's sentences. Our traveler, the silent guest, nods at the right moments and keeps walking. The patched conic approximations we teach in classrooms sag under the precision demanded by this case, so we retrieve the full n-body integration and let computers stitch the dynamics without apology. There is no closed orbit here, no ellipse to tuck safely into our bedtime stories. The energy is positive. The future is outward, a gravitational slingshot, not a capture. It is not science fiction to imagine launching a fast response probe into a pursuit trajectory to steal a few weeks or months of companionship and return with samples of light and dust. We know how to do the math. We would merely need to do it faster, together, with a budget equal to our curiosity. Perhaps the best gift this visitor offers is a reason to build that readiness as policy, not as poetry. But between the readiness we dream of and the reality we live in, there is a gap, and gaps are where suspicion grows. Telemetry from several ground facilities arrive with odd lacunae, timestamps with the flavor of reprocessing, calibration files that seem to have fallen behind the calendar, gaps that telescope schedulers attributed to weather and power and the ordinary vicissitudes of a planet's surface life. Then there were the rumors, as reliable as gossip and twice as sticky, that certain streams from certain assets had been scrubbed, sanitized, delayed, or embargoed beyond the usual cadence. NASA, ESA, and other agencies issued the kind of statements that are accurate and yet unsatisfying. Data pipelines are complex, quality control matters, do not mistake caution for concealment. Those are true sentences. They are also the kind of sentences that fail to quench a public thirst that has been taught by other eras and other silences to read absence as intent. It is easy to forget that science hates nothing more than a missing number, that engineers lose sleep over corrupted bits, that a harried technicite. Shin on a midnight shift is a more plausible author of an anomaly than a committee of conspirators. Still, the silence cupped in those gaps became a sound of its own. In that sound, people heard scrubbing, and in scrubbing, they heard secrecy, and in secrecy, they heard a story ready to bloom. There is a version of this story in which fervor burns down the house. We must not tell that one. There is another version in which skepticism's cool hand guides us through the fog without squeezing the life out of wonder. That is the version worthy of a species that built radio telescopes in deserts and carried spectrometers into orbit. If anomalies live in the data, we will find them with patience and better instruments. If the gaps were artifacts of human logistics, we will seal them with process and kindness for the mortals who run the machines. If something truly extraordinary was glimpsed and then hidden, the very pressure of curiosity will pry it loose, because secrecy and science share a long border, and science is a better climber. The important point is this: we do not need conspiracy to make this moment consequential. The mere existence of a third interstellar visitor, if confirmed, already rewrites the tempo of our cosmic neighborhood. It implies a population density of wanderers, a commerce of debris between suns, a galaxy in which loneliness is a misreading of the statistics. The rest is detail, and detail is where revolutions live. Consider what follows if we step into this future eyes open. A network of rapid response telescopes with automated schedulers that elbow ordinary business aside when the sky blinks the interstellar code. A playbook for launching small, hot-tempered probes on weeks' notice. Solid propellant first stages stacked in quiet corners. Guidance software tuned to fluid trajectories where windows are measured in hours. Spectrometers that can taste the faintest breath of unfamiliar chemistry. Radar systems that can sketch a body with the delicacy of a blind sculptor's hands. Policies that keep raw data raw, because trust is part of propulsion. Curricula that teach school children not only the names of planets, but the etiquette of visitors. And then, beyond the engineering and the governance, the softer transformations. A culture that wakes each morning into a sky that might host a messenger, a relic, a puzzle whose solution requires the best of us. It could become ordinary to be extraordinary. We might, in learning to welcome what comes from other suns, learn again how to welcome each other. There is an ethical weather to discovery that we ignore at our peril. If someday we find not a rock, but a something, assembled, intentional, a structure that fails to collapse under the definitions of artifact and machine, what will we owe it? Silence first, perhaps, while we learn to listen, then honesty, because to misrepresent our curiosity is to betray it, then restraint, because we are not the only intelligence that can be clumsy. We will have to decide whether to touch and how and with what voice. Brian Cox might tell us that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, but precisely as beautiful as our equations allow. Michio Kaku might remind us that civilizations, if they exist in plurality, stratify across scales of power and patience, and that humility is a technology too. The pragmatic path winds between those peaks. Build instruments that can tell the difference between the breath of a rock and the sigh of a machine. Establish norms before need forces us into improvisation. Keep the sky public, because the sky has always been the most democratic of commons. The sensation of being watched can make children of us all. Let us meet it with the adult virtues of transparency and courage. The visitor will recede, its light falling below the threshold where even the largest mirrors can coax signal from noise. It will rejoin the dark where it lived before us, its trajectory now annotated by our brief acquaintance. The ephemerides will continue, asymptotes, drawn toward coordinates that no human eye will ever see. In a few years only the papers will remain, and the warm memories of nights when observatories hummed like beehives, and the colder memory of a public argument about what was scrubbed and why. The precise answer to that argument may never feel satisfying. Human systems deliver truth with edges worn down by caution. But the larger answer is already here, and it is generous. The galaxy is a conversation, not a monologue. To stand on a small world and hear, faint but real, the footsteps of a traveler is to be invited into a larger grammar. We will accept. We already have. We are building the sentences now. New instruments, new norms, new reflexes that privilege openness and speed, rigor and wonder in the same breath. We will be ready when the next knock comes. Ready to measure, ready to doubt, ready to be moved. The last thing to say is the first thing we felt, awe but disciplined, wonder but fluent. We can hold a curve fit and a dream at the same time. We can ask NASA for the unvarnished stream while remembering that a nation's space program is a cathedral of many hands, most of them too busy doing the work to architect a plot. If something was hidden, it will be unhidden, because the truth has a pressure gradient and humanity has learned to follow gradients to their source. If nothing was hidden, then the rumor did what rumors do, burned fast and left warmth behind. And in that warmth, we found the resolve to write better procedures. Either way, we have learned to watch for visitors and to see in their brief presence a mirror of our long future. We are no longer beginners at this. We are an audience that understands the choreography of chance and law. The universe is a theater that does not end its run. The curtain never falls. There is only the music of gravity, the counterpoint of light, and the occasional exquisite entrance of a stranger who reminds us that the map we draw is not the world, but the invitation. We accept